Guys, Xilonen is shaping up to be one of the best characters in Genshin Impact, and today we'll tell you all you need to know regarding her builds, playstyle, and some of her constellations. Let's go! So, first of all, I want to contextualize a few things first. Since after the first video I made on her, which I posted a few weeks ago, people were a bit confused regarding how she worked. I will elaborate on that more now. To summarize, Xilonen basically has two types of playstyles, and they're purely dependent on your team structure. In particular, she acts differently depending on whether or not you have two or more Electro, Cryo, Pyro or Hydro characters on your team. This is tied to her Elemental skill, which summons 3 stereo mixers, represented by the small arrows you see near a render. These mixers have an elemental typing, which is connected to the typings of the characters on the team. To begin with, they are Geo, but let's say you have 2 Hydro and an Anemo unit on your team with Xilonen. 2 of them will become Hydro, while the last will stay Geo. Note that Xilonen's mixers can't resonate with Anemo and Dendro, which is why the last is staying Geo in that case. This is important because if at least 2 of those mixers change typing like it happened with the Hydro scenarios, it will enable some parts of her kit. For one, she gets to reduce resistance on surrounding opponents for all the mixer's elements, in this case Hydro and Geo. Secondarily, with her burst, if the same condition is respected, she gets to repeatedly heal the active character by a quite big amount, enough to make her able to solo sustain the team. In short, as long as you have at least 2 Cryo, Pyro, Hydro or Electro characters on your team, you will enable some quite amazing utility from her, which will make her potentially one of the best units in the game. On the flip side, let's say you want to use her on a different type of composition, for example on a triple Geo team or a Quicken team with an Anemo unit, an Electro unit and a Dendro unit. In this scenario, as a summary, her kit won't focus on utility at all, but rather it will mostly focus on increasing her own damage capabilities, by giving her damage bonus instead of reducing the opponent's resistance, and making her burst deal more damage instead of healing. While this could make sort of sense from a design perspective, because some of these compositions are really geared towards increasing her output like the Geo-packed ones, the thing is, the damage she's dealing isn't really making up for how strong her support can be. The bottom line is that it makes playstats where you play her for her damage possible, especially because in these cases she gets Geo Infusion and defensive scaling normal and planche attacks. But rather than being a strong alternative to her support playstyle, it just kind of seems a niche use of Constellation Zero as of right now. So, just to summarize, if you bring at least 2 Cryo, Electro, Pyro or Hydro characters, you will unleash her supportive utility to the fullest. If you don't and want to play something like triple Geo, she will just be dealing some damage, which is not looking too good at the moment. Still, this does open up for multiple build possibilities depending on how exactly you want to play her. I will start by talking about her supportive assets, since they represent her main playstyle to me. First of all, I want to point out that when she'll come out, she'll set new records for a lot of meta teams damage-wise. Among all of the compositions that feature DPS that don't have a wide variety of supports, like Molani, Nuvolette, Nabia or Itto. For them, Xilonen just feels like a massive net increase, since she's replacing Zhongli on those teams and is just doing much better offensively speaking. For the rest, her damage amplification capabilities are similar to Kazuha's, but more flexible because she just straight up reduces resistance on all opponents in range. So in terms of pure damage, she'll either be a side grade or better than him depending on the team, with a few cases where they can be used together with great results. Now let's proceed with the builds. Artifacts wise, it's quite straightforward. You want to maximize her supportive capabilities, and this makes the new Nathan set an obvious choice for her, since it allows her to buff some of the teammates' damage bonus by 40%. Honestly, it's a really crucial addition for her to be awesome, and it's comparable to what Anemo units like Kazuha gain from using the Verdicent Veneer set. This is good and all, but in a way it brings up the question. Won't her value go down if there is another unit that specifically wants to use this set as well, considering its effects can't stack? Potentially, but I assume they're smart enough at Oivers that they won't allow this to happen at all. Aside from this, you really want to focus on defense stats and energy recharge, and even then it might not be a must. This is in the light of her being able to use the burst efficiently, since her healing scales off defense. The flip side to this is that she might not need to use the burst on teams that already have a healer, like Bennett, which you might want to bring alongside Xilonen for the offensive utility it provides. Still, in the case you want to use it every rotation, an energy recharge stance and some substats, or an energy recharge weapon like Favonius will suffice in most cases. Now, talking about her weapons, this is interesting because she's a sword user that gets access to quite a few nice supportive options. Her signature is for sure her best choice, as it provides a team-wide damage bonus on top of increasing her defense by a lot, maximizing her healing as a result. Damage bonus is a really flexible type of buff, and it will result in a sizable increase in practically all the teams she fits in. Still, it's not her only option. For example, she can use Freedom Sworn, another supportive weapon, to provide buffs for the team. Freedom Sworn gives attack percent plus normal and charge attack damage bonuses, which is for sure less flexible than general damage bonuses, but in scenarios where you have to use an on-fielder that can fully take advantage of both of those buffs, like Arlecchino, Freedom Sworn can end up being competitive damage-wise. Alternatively, you can just use Favonius and it will be fine, although you have to make sure to build a minimum of crit rate stats for it to be consistent. The Not Uncraftable is also a fine option, since it gives a lot of defense and was specifically introduced for Xilonen, I imagine. Now let's talk about her offensive playstyle, but first let me remind you that if you enjoy my channel but you haven't subbed yet, please consider doing so because it really makes me notice your support. Okay, of course in this scenario you want her builds to be somewhat different compared to her supportive playstyle. To begin with, her preferred set becomes the one we got in the new Natlan domain, the Obsidian Codex, which is just the clear-cut best option for any character that can enter the Night Soul Blessing state. There are solid alternatives here, like the Husk set or the Marachusei set if you're using Fiorina on the team, but the Natlan set is just a clear-cut best. Stats-wise, defense is, of course, still very important, as it's what all of her attacks scale off, but of course damage bonus and crit become much more integral to how you want to build her. Weapons-wise, it's interesting because she's a character that specifically gets offensive benefits from being able to plunge, since she has nice defensive scalings for it and also Geo-Infusion, of course. This playstyle would of course require you to have Xilonen to enable it, and currently it's looking preferable to other types of offensive usages for her. She's got multiple nice options here. As for her own damage specifically, her signature loses value since it's more of a utility weapon, and something like Chiori's signature can surpass it for Xilonen. Alternatively, general use options like Wolffang, Jade Cutter, Black Sword are still pretty nice. Before jumping to some of her Constellations value, I want to point out one niche thing. Her becoming a Geo staple in the meta could increase the value of Chiori's signature, Uraku Mitsugiri. The reason is that the weapon provides meaningful normal and elemental skill damage bonuses for the holder as a baseline, but they double in value if a Geo character is on the team. This was already nice with the presence of a character like Zhongli that can be slotted in about anywhere, but with Xilonen potentially becoming a best in slot for a wide array of teams, it will be even more amplified. For example, Fiorina and Clorent can use the weapon nicely. Since, at least according to the rumors, the weapon should be featured in Xilonen's next weapon banner, this is pretty nice. Now, for our Constellations, I will just analyze the first three for now, because the higher ones can only be fully gauged in the light of speedruns, which are hard to analyze hypothetically and theory crafting wise. They need more practical scenarios. Her first two Constellations specifically have been a huge matter of discussion. The first one makes her give the active character interruption resistance, which combined with her healing hypothetically makes her a massive defensive support. However, the magnitude of this interruption resistance is a bit underwhelming, as it appears it's just on the level of what characters like Sino and Ayato get. These characters can still be annoying to play with as a shielder at times, and ultimately it means that while it's a nice addition to Xilonen's kit, it doesn't make her an impeccable defensive support as we all have hoped. Her Constellation 2 makes her give the rest of the team some huge stat bonuses depending on what their elements are. This is really nice at a glance, but it's worth mentioning that some of these buffs here are less meaningful than others. For example, Geo and Cryo units are clearly getting superior statistical buffs compared to Pyro and Hydro characters. Electro is getting something unique that is hard to estimate in hypothetical terms, namely a big energy refund and a burst cooldown reduction. I don't think this is quite as great as getting stat buffs, but I'm reserving my judgment for this one in particular. In general, the Constellation 2 will buff teammates from anywhere between 10 and 20% damage, with Geo and Cryo characters typically getting the bigger damage bump, probably because they are in a weaker position in the meta right now. This puts it somewhat below something like Nahida's Constellation 2 on average impact-wise, but it's still a very good Constellation for how strong and versatile it is. Constellation 2 also makes her always activate the Geo element mixers on her skill. This means that at this level, even if 3 Geo are on the team, she will still be reducing resistance for them all. This benefits mono Geo compositions like Ito a lot, and makes her even more flexible than she already is as a result. Constellation 3 increases her skill talent level, which makes her resistance reduction effect slightly bigger. Nice team-wide damage increase, but no biggie. Overall, all of our early Constellations are useful in one way or another, with the Constellation 2 in particular being an optimal stopping point. And with this, I'm done for today. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe, and bye bye.